Have you ever wondered what it was really like to live in a world where every smile was carefully painted, every movement choreographed to perfection, and every glance carried the weight of silent poetry? A world where you became a living embodiment of art, elegance, and unspoken longing. Tonight, let us slip quietly into the lantern-lit alleyways of Edo, Japan, step beyond the delicate shoshi screens, and breathe the incense-laced air of a tea house where laughter and tears blend seamlessly with the scent of camellias. Welcome, my friend, to a gentle journey into the hidden heart of Edo, a city where the rhythms of life pulsed beneath silk kimonos and hairpins, glimmered like constellations against midnight air. This is the story of a geisha, or more precisely, what it was really like to live in Edo, Japan as a geisha. We often think of geisha as shimmering figures frozen in time, ethereal silhouettes with white faces and crimson lips. But beneath each layer of painted beauty lay a soul as fragile and complex as the finest porcelain. Imagine waking before dawn, when the city still slumbers beneath its morning mist. You rise to the distant echo of temple bells, your breath barely disturbing the silence. The air is crisp, and your mind is already rehearsing songs, steps, and lines of ancient poetry, each syllable a soft footfall on an invisible path. A young girl born into this world did not simply choose to become a geisha. She was chosen by fate, family debts, or the mysterious pull of destiny. From as young as 6 or 7, she would be sold or apprenticed into an ukiyo, the geisha house, where the first lessons were not about beauty, but about obedience, patience, and humility. Imagine yourself, a small child in a heavy kimono that drags at your knees, bowing endlessly, learning to kneel without complaint, even as your legs tremble. The rhythm of your days becomes a soft symphony of clacking geta sandals, distant shamisen notes drifting through sliding doors, and the steady hum of whispered corrections from elder sisters. As you grow, your identity is slowly erased and rewritten. Your birth name disappears, replaced by a gaime, a new name that embodies your rebirth as an artist of presence. You learn to listen more than to speak, to smile even when your heart aches, and to transform each moment of personal longing into a carefully controlled performance. But beyond the elegant dinners and laughter-filled banquets, life as a geisha was an endless negotiation with loneliness. Imagine finishing a night of entertaining guests, your hair still heavy with wax and combs, your face smudged beneath the lantern glow as you remove layers of silk in a tiny room that echoes with memories of songs and laughter that were never truly yours. Perhaps the most exquisite irony is that geisha were both everywhere and nowhere. They were desired but untouchable, admired yet often misunderstood. Their value lay not in being possessed, but in being imagined, an eternal flower that could never be picked. Outside, Edo bustles with the voices of merchants, samurai, and farmers. The smell of grilled fish mixes with damp earth and blooming plum trees. Within this vibrant chaos, the geisha world floats like a silent garden pond, smooth on the surface, but teeming with unseen struggles below. Each gesture, the way a sleeve is lifted, the angle of a bow, the hidden pause before a fan snaps shut, is a coded language, a dance that holds centuries of discipline. Every night is an act, but an act performed with sincerity, so deep it becomes indistinguishable from the geisha's true self. Underneath the shimmering layers of brocade lies a young woman who once dreamt of running barefoot across summer fields, who perhaps once believed in the simplicity of love before learning that love, too, is a performance. Each guest she entertains brings a story, a secret, a request for companionship without attachment. She answers with a song, a delicate laugh, a fleeting gaze, the price of intimacy without ownership. The geisha's path is a winding garden path at dusk, beautiful, contemplative, yet leading always to another veil of moonlit uncertainty. She is an artist, a confidant, a keeper of fragile illusions. At night, when she washes off the thick white paste, she confronts the face she has almost forgotten. A face that once belonged to a little girl who watched the cherry blossoms fall with wide, unguarded eyes. And yet, she returns to the mirror the next evening, drawing new lines, pinning her hair higher, practicing each note until it becomes a part of her breath. Why? Because somewhere within that ritual lies the quiet promise of transcendence, that in creating beauty for others, she might catch a glimpse of something eternal for herself. Tonight, we will walk slowly beside her. We will hear the quiet shuffle of her feet across tatami mats, taste the bitterness of her tea, feel the tightness of her obi across her ribs. We will not rush. We will sit in the gentle glow of paper lanterns and allow her story to unfold like a delicate fan, each rib holding a secret, each fold hiding a quiet resilience. So settle into your favorite chair, perhaps dim the lights, let the hum of the city outside become a distant echo. Take a slow breath, as if inhaling the faint perfume of plum blossoms drifting through an open shoshi door. Tonight, we are not just telling you about geisha. We are inviting you to become a silent guest in her world, to learn what it was really like to live in. Edo Japan is a geisha, beyond the painted face, beyond the dance into the tender shadows, where a woman becomes both an illusion and a truth all at once. Close your eyes and imagine the gentle creak of a shoshi door sliding open at dawn. Before the city has fully awakened, a young girl rises from her futon, her breath forming tiny clouds in the chill of the morning. Her small hands, rough from endless chores, smooth the creases of her simple cotton yukata. She is not yet a geisha. She is a shikomi, a servant girl, an apprentice, a vessel of unformed potential. The journey of a geisha begins far from the bright lanterns and painted smiles. It starts in the shadows of the ukiyo, the geisha house, where every day is a test of patience and silent endurance. Imagine being no more than 10 years old, brought here because your family could no longer afford to feed you, or because they saw a spark of beauty that could perhaps one day repay debts. In the narrow corridors of the ukiyo, she learns to become invisible. Her first lessons are not in dance or music, but in silence. She sweeps ash from the hearth before the older geisha awaken, polishes wooden clogs until they reflect the dawnlight, fetches water from wells that echo with the quiet sighs of early morning. Each task is a quiet incantation, to obey without complaint, to serve without expectation, to exist without leaving a trace. The older geisha glide past her like moonlight, their faces painted in layers of quiet perfection. Their laughter rings soft and distant, like bells in a distant temple, and the young shikomi watches from doorways, her eyes wide and hungry. She studies every tilt of the wrist, every flick of the fan, every graceful turn that seems to suspend time itself. In the evenings, she curls up in a small corner of the house, her legs cramped from kneeling too long, her fingers raw from scrubbing floors and washing kimono sashes. She listens to the distant strains of shamisen drifting from the practice room, each note a promise of a future she can barely imagine. But progress is not guaranteed. Many girls remain shikomi for years, some forever. Those who lack discipline or beauty, those who fall ill, or simply fail to master the subtle etiquette, are dismissed quietly, returned to lives of labor or worse. For the lucky few, the day arrives when they are elevated to minarai, learning by watching. This is when the young girl is allowed to accompany an older geisha to banquets and gatherings, not to perform, but to observe, to absorb the unspoken language of the room. She wears a simple kimono with a modest obi, her face still bare of the iconic white makeup. Her eyes become her most important tools, tracing the lines of laughter on a guest's face, memorizing the exact moment a cup should be refilled, or when a subtle joke requires a soft ripple of laughter rather than a loud burst. At this stage, she begins to understand that a geisha is not just a performer, but a mirror to the desires of the room. Her presence soothes egos, her words flatter without falsehood, Her laughter invites, yet holds a polite distance. The transition from Minarai to Maiko, the young apprentice geisha, is marked by ritual and transformation. On the appointed day, the girl sits in front of a mirror framed in black lacquer. For the first time, she feels the heavy weight of the white oshiroi paste as it is applied to her face and neck, leaving two unpainted V-shapes at the nape, a small, hidden invitation to the imagination. The first time she sees her reflection, she hardly recognizes herself. The girl from the countryside has vanished, replaced by a delicate ghost of moonlight, her lips painted into a small crimson. Now her hair sculpted into elaborate shapes, adorned with kenzashi, shimmering hair ornaments that catch every flicker of lantern light. This transformation is more than cosmetic. It is a shedding of her former life, a symbolic rebirth into the world of ephemeral beauty and rigorous artistry. From this moment forward, every step is a performance, every word a verse of an ancient poem. The daily life of a Maiko is a relentless cycle of training and service. From morning until evening, she practices shamisen, drums, dance, calligraphy, tea ceremony, and the subtle art of conversation. Each discipline is a universe of detail, a silent vow to never stop learning. Consider the practice of dance, not merely movement, but an embodiment of seasons, stories, and moods. A single turn of the wrist might represent a falling cherry blossom. A bowed head could hint at the loneliness of an autumn moon. In the subdued light of a practice room, the young Maiko repeats the same gesture hundreds of times, sweat soaking into her under kimono, her instructor, Svan tapping lightly against her shoulder to correct the angle of her arm or the depth of her bow. But there is no applause here. Only the quiet echo of footsteps on tatami, the slow ticking of a wall clock, and the silent hope that one day these movements will ripple across an audience's heart like a pebble in a still pond. Outside the ukiyo, Edo thrums with life, fishmongers calling out their wares at dawn, street vendors frying sweet rice cakes, children chasing each other with wooden swords. Yet the world inside the Geisha district is an island adrift in time, governed by codes older than memory. Evenings are filled with banquets, the clinking of sake cups, and the low hum of a shamisen weaving between laughter and stories. The Maiko sits slightly behind the older geisha, her posture perfect, her hands folded demurely in her lap. When she laughs, it is with a practiced softness that never threatens to overshadow her elder sisters. As guests depart into the misty streets, the Maiko assists in gathering trays and folding away silk cushions, her feet aching from hours in impossibly high ukobo sandals. Under the thin veil of moonlight, she walks home through narrow alleyways where shadows press close. Against wooden walls, her mind replaying every interaction of the night, every mistake, every half second where her bow may have been too deep or her laugh too hesitant. Back at the ukiyo, she scrubs away the white makeup, her hands trembling slightly, her reflection a patchwork of past and present selves. Beneath the paint, she rediscovers the tired, tender face of a girl who still dreams of fireflies in summer fields, who longs for a mother's touch or a stolen moment of freedom beyond the high walls of duty. Yet as dawn approaches once more, she prepares to rise again, to paint the same smile, to tie the same obi tighter around her ribs. For in this life, repetition is not punishment. It is the rhythm of survival, the quiet mantra of becoming more than human, of becoming an echo of something timeless and fleeting all at once. When she finally lies down on her futon, the silence of the ukiyo wraps around her like a second kimono. Somewhere in the distance, a nightingale sings beneath the pale moon. She listens, her eyes slowly closing, her heart drifting between exhaustion and a strange, elusive peace. This is not a fairy tale. This is not the romanticized dream of painted lips and silken sleeves. This is the intimate, unguarded truth of a young girl's journey into a life of art, sacrifice, and silent resilience. As dawn stretches her pale fingers across the tiled rooftops of Edo, The Maiko's day begins long before the city stirs. Before she even opens her eyes, her mind is already rehearsing. The precise flick of her fan, the gentle incline of her head when serving tea, the exact weight of a smile that must suggest warmth without invitation. While outsiders imagine geisha life as a dreamy parade of silk and songs, the truth is far more intricate. A chess game played in hushed tones and subtle gestures. Each day unfolds like a scroll of delicate calligraphy, each brushstroke revealing an unspoken strategy for survival. The ukiyo is not just a home. It is a kingdom governed by unbreakable hierarchies. At the top sits the okasan, the mother of the house, a woman whose gaze alone can freeze a maiko mid-step. She is part mentor, part warden, part businesswoman. Her decisions shape the destiny of each girl under her roof. Beneath her, senior geisha rule like quiet empresses. Their names echo beyond the red lanterns into tea houses and noble courts. They are not merely entertainers. They are powerful brokers of influence, carrying secrets traded like rare silk. When a samurai leans too close during a banquet, it is the senior geisha who deflects with a gentle laugh and redirects the conversation. She knows which merchant favors which poem, which lord harbors which scandal. She collects these details not as gossip, but as currency. For the maiko, every moment is an apprenticeship in this invisible diplomacy. She learns that a misplaced glance can plant seeds of jealousy, that a careless word can cascade into ruin for the entire house. When she carries trays of tea into the room, her hands must never tremble. When she pours sake, her wrist must curve like a willow branch in spring. Sometimes, after the guests leave and the hall is thick with the scent of incense and sake, the okasan will summon the maiko for a quiet review. She sits on her knees, head bowed so low, her forehead nearly touches the tatami. The older woman's voice is soft but unwavering. You smiled too brightly at the guest from Satsuma. A geisha must illuminate the room, not set it aflame. The young maiko's heart races under her layers of silk, but she replies only with a meek, "Hi, okasan." There is no room for defiance. There is only the long road of correction, 1,000 tiny adjustments that sculpt her from a raw ember into a controlled flame. Beyond the walls, Edo pulses with a different rhythm. Daimyo processions clog the streets. Paper lanterns bloom in the night air, and commoners gather under blooming cherry trees to sip rice wine and laugh with abandon. Yet inside the ukiyo, time is measured in the tightening of obi knots and the echo of footfalls in a silent corridor. When evening descends, the maiko's transformation begins anew. Attendants arrive with trays of combs and pins, pots of fragrant oils, and the thick white paste that will bury her girlhood beneath layers of ritual. She kneels on a small cushion, as her hair is twisted and pulled into elaborate shapes, each style marking her rank and her stage in training. The hair ornaments, kanzashi, are chosen carefully. A sprig of plum blossom in winter, a cascade of wisteria in spring, a cluster of chrysanthemums in autumn. Each season speaks through her silhouette, whispering to those who know how to listen. The Aoshiroi makeup is applied meticulously. First the skin is cleaned and oiled. Then layer upon layer of white paste is smoothed across her face and neck, leaving the nape exposed in the shape of two delicate commas, a detail considered intensely alluring, hinting at vulnerability and mystery. Her lips are painted in sharp crimson curves, her eyebrows softened into gentle arches that suggest both innocence and wisdom beyond her years. When she finally stands draped in multi-layered kimono heavy enough to sway her balance, she becomes an apparition, an ideal. A vessel of cultural memory, walking on wooden clogs that elevate her both literally and symbolically above the common world. The night's work begins at Oshaya, the tea houses where patrons gather not merely for drink, but for an illusion of timelessness. As she enters, conversations soften, fans flutter, and eyes drift toward her with a mixture of curiosity and reverence. She does not hurry. Each step is a verse in a silent poem, each tilt of her head a syllable in an ancient song. She seats herself just so, ensuring the trailing edge of her kimono pools elegantly on the tatami. Then begins the dance of words. Patrons may ask her about poetry, about the moonrise, about the scent of plum blossoms in the garden. She answers with phrases polished smooth as river stones, each one crafted to maintain the delicate balance between flattery and independence. An elder merchant might attempt a joke, his voice thick with sake. She laughs softly, covering her mouth with her sleeve, not in shame but in practiced demureness. Another patron challenges her to a game of kitsune ken, the Foxwood Village hand game. She accepts, her fingers quick and graceful, her laughter a fleeting note that disappears into the lantern-lit night. All the while, she is watching, the flicker of a man's gaze, the moment a cup needs refilling, the subtle tension when a rival geisha enters the room. This vigilance is her true art. Outside, the city hums with the chaos of 1,000 lives. Inside, she preserves a fragile tranquility, a quiet world that floats above reality like a paper lantern on a summer river. When she returns to the ukiyo in the pale hush before dawn, her feet burn, her back aches from the weight of the kimono, and her throat is hoarse from endless careful words. But her mind is alive, reviewing every detail, replaying each smile, each glance, each carefully measured pause. She slips out of her elaborate layers, each fold a surrender of the night's borrowed persona. Before the mirror, she wipes away the thick white paste, watching her true face emerge from the shadows like a ghost returning to its body. She is reminded again that the geisha is not simply a woman. She is a story made flesh, a living poem, a vessel for centuries of beauty and expectation. As she lies down at last, her hands still tingling from the strings of the shamisen, her mind drifts to the dreams of childhood that now seem distant as the stars. In the space between wakefulness and sleep, she wonders if the soft laughter she hears in the night is her own, echoing back across the corridors of her mind, or a memory of another life she has left far behind. In the heart of the Hanamachi, the geisha district, every fold of silk carries a story. Every ornament whispers a secret. The world outside believes the geisha to be an open performance, songs, dances, coy smiles. But beneath the shimmering surface lies a labyrinth of quiet codes, unspoken rivalries, and silent battles. A maiko's kimono is more than clothing. It is an armor and a diary stitched in thread. The patterns on her sleeves hint at her status. The seasonal motifs reflect her attunement to nature, and the way her obi is tied signals her stage in apprenticeship. Even the length of her trailing hem suggests both youth and the weight of expectation, a visual poem to be read by the initiated. Imagine her moving down the lantern-lit street. The faint rustle of silk sounds almost like autumn leaves brushing against stone. Passers-by bare heads, some in reverence, some in curiosity, others perhaps in envy. But within the ukiyo, these garments are a currency of power. Each new kimono requires countless hours of labor, delicate dyeing, precise embroidery, careful layering. When the Aukasan grants a new kimono, it is both a gift and a subtle message, proof of investment, a test of worthiness, a burden to be carried with dignity. For the maiko, the kimono becomes an extension of her own skin. Under its weight, she learns to control every movement, every breath. An accidental wrinkle during a tea ceremony could be a silent scandal. A misplaced sleeve during a dance could signal incompetence. In this world, perfection is not a goal. It is a basic expectation. Beyond the silk, there are the fans, small but potent tools. A geisha's fan is her secret weapon. With it, she can tease or conceal, invite or dismiss, emphasize or soften. The fan opens and closes like a conversation. A flutter here to highlight a witty remark, a slow fold to signal thoughtful pause. Even more hidden are the relationships that shape her daily life. Older geisha, the ones who have crossed from Mako to full-fledged Geiko, hold power in ways few outsiders comprehend. Their words shape reputations. Their alliances determine invitations to prestigious parties. Their praise or scorn can echo through the entire Hanamachi. A single compliment from a respected Geiko might open doors to higher-paying patrons or exclusive tea houses. A quiet snub could mean weeks without invitations, dwindling opportunities, and the slow fade of one's standing in the community. In this intricate dance, each Mako learns to navigate alliances delicately. A shared glance during a rehearsal, a small favor in the dressing room, an extra hair ornament offered during festival season. These tiny gestures ripple through the ukiyo like stones dropped into a still pond. Underneath all the silk and ceremony lies a persistent tension, the balance between individual aspiration and collective harmony. A Mako dreams of standing out, of becoming a celebrated Geiko whose name is spoken in noble courts and whispered among merchants. But she must also protect the reputation of her house, maintain unity with her sisters, and uphold the delicate fabric of the Hanamaka's social web. Then there are the patrons, the lifeblood of this floating world. Patrons come in many forms. Wealthy merchants seeking refuge from daily toil, minor lords hoping to polish their image with cultured companionship, poets yearning for a muse. They arrive bearing gifts, rare incense, imported fabrics, small fortunes wrapped in silk pouches. Yet gifts are never free. Each offering is a transaction, each compliment a subtle contract. The Mako must accept with grace, always hinting at gratitude without ever fully surrendering. She is expected to remain unattainable, an elegant moon glimpsed behind drifting clouds. In quiet rooms lit only by flickering candles, a patron might lean forward, whispering secrets half forgotten by morning. The Mako listens, her face serene, her mind recording each word like ink on rice paper. She knows that every confession could one day be a shield or a blade. Sometimes she feels the weight of the room pressing on her chest. The laughter, the songs, the clinking cups, all swirl into a golden haze, while beneath it pulses a current of calculation and careful maneuvering. After each gathering, as she walks back through the dim alleys, the glow of the lanterns softens her silhouette. She might pause beneath a blooming plum tree, its petals drifting in the night breeze like tiny paper prayers. For a fleeting moment, she allows herself to exhale, to remember the sound of cicadas in her childhood village or the warmth of a mother's hand guiding her across a narrow bridge. But nostalgia is a luxury she cannot afford for long. The moment passes, and she resumes her quiet procession through the labyrinthine streets. When she returns to the ukiyo, the echoes of the evening still shimmer on her skin. In the communal room, she bows to her elder sisters, exchanging small nods that contain entire conversations. She knows which sister stumbled during her shamisen piece, who hesitated too long before a joke, who earned unexpected praise. She unlaces her obi slowly, folding each layer with practiced precision. The scent of camellia oil lingers in her hair, a fragile reminder of the persona she must reconstruct each evening. As she bathes, her fingers trace the faint bruises left by the heavy kimono cords. The water turns cloudy with remnants of white makeup, as though she is washing away not just paint, but fragments of her public self. Finally, wrapped in a simple yukata, she sits before her small mirror. In the candlelight, her face looks almost translucent, her eyes deep wells holding the night's secrets. She studies herself not with vanity, but with a calm resignation, an artist regarding a half-finished scroll, a performer reviewing silent notes after a concert. She knows that each night is both a performance and a lesson, each morning a chance to begin again. The cycle continues endlessly, a delicate web of repetition and evolution. Tomorrow will bring new patrons, new alliances, new pitfalls, new fans to open, new silences to hold, new smiles to shape like the curve of a moonlit river. Yet beneath it all, a small ember persists, a quiet defiance, a whispered prayer for a future beyond the weight of silk and shadow. When dawn finally begins to breathe light over the tiled rooftops of Edo, the hanamashi stirs, not with shouts or hurried footsteps, but with the gentle sigh of sliding shoshi doors and the soft shuffling of bare feet on polished wood. In these early hours, the world outside still dreams of fields, of market stalls, of the promise of a new day. But inside the ukiyo, a different kind of awakening unfolds. One not of promise, but of duty. Not of fresh possibility, but of the careful maintenance of an ancient illusion. A maiko begins her day with a quiet ritual before the mirror. Unlike the bright, moon-like face she presents to patrons, this morning reflection is raw and unguarded. The candle flickers, casting a trembling glow that makes her features dance between reality and dream. She traces her cheekbones, examining small blemishes hidden each night beneath thick layers of oshiroi. Her eyes, usually wide and inviting, seem deeper now, almost like two distant lanterns glimpsed across a misty canal. She applies the white foundation with slow, deliberate movements, each stroke a silent mantra. The thick, cool paste presses into her skin, erasing the warmth of her natural complexion and transforming her into a living screen on which patrons will project their fantasies. The crimson on her lips is applied last, a small, decisive slash of color that turns the silence of her expression into a song. When she finishes, she is no longer the young girl from the countryside who once chased dragonflies by the river. She is reborn into the carefully constructed persona that Edo demands, a creature of art, elegance, and mystery. Outside, the first carts begin to creak along the main street, carrying fish wrapped in straw, crates of persimmons, and woven baskets filled with fresh tofu. Vendors set up their stalls, calling to one another in cheerful voices that echo against the narrow alley walls. The city pulses with its own restless energy, but the geisha world remains just out of reach, floating above it all like a pale lotus on a murky pond. Within the ukiyo, lessons resume immediately after morning preparations. The shamisen teacher arrives, her face marked by decades of stern instruction. The maiko sits seiza style, her legs folded neatly beneath her, eyes fixed on the instrument as though it holds the secrets of the universe. Each pluck of the strings is a thread connecting her to an unbroken line of women who came before, each one carrying the same weight of expectation and grace. The movements are repetitive, the melody simple, yet mastering them can take a lifetime. A misplaced note or a momentary hesitation might go unnoticed by an untrained ear, but among the sisters, these small fractures echo loudly. After music, she moves to dance, the language of the body that transcends even the most poetic of verses. Her teacher demonstrates each posture slowly, the angle of the wrist, the tilt of the head, the subtle flex of toes against the tatami mat. Each step is both a whisper and a shout, an unspoken confession of her inner world. She repeats the sequence countless times, sweat gathering beneath the heavy silk layers, her breath shallow and controlled. The wooden floor absorbs her determination, her fear, her fleeting moments of triumph. During short breaks, the maiko might sip tea brewed with roasted rice, the warmth briefly dissolving the tension coiled in her spine. Across the room, another sister carefully repairs a hair ornament broken. During rehearsal, the small act embodying an entire universe of discipline and humility. Yet even in these quiet interludes, her mind does not wander freely. She rehearses tonight's conversations in her head, the delicate balance of humor and modesty, the careful steering of topics away from politics or coarse gossip. Every phrase she utters must glide like a crane across still water, graceful yet precise. As afternoon wanes, preparations for the evening begin anew. Her hair, sculpted into elaborate shapes that recall the swoop of a crane's wings or the arc of a falling blossom, is adorned with kanzashi pins, tiny, delicate weapons in the unspoken battles of social standing. The maiko eats an early meal alone or with her sisters. It is simple: rice, pickled vegetables, perhaps a small piece of grilled fish if the household is doing well. Food is fuel, not pleasure. It sustains her through the long hours of performance and expectation, but it never becomes a focus. She learns to eat lightly, to exist lightly, to inhabit her own body as though it were a fragile paper lantern drifting in a spring breeze. As dusk falls, the city outside transforms. Lanterns ignite one by one, their warm glow dancing along the canals. The air thickens with the scent of grilled eel and sweet soy. Courtesans laugh behind drawn curtains. Merchants argue over debts in hushed voices. The world sharpens into 1,000 small moments, each one glimmering like a shard of lacquered wood. In this twilight realm, the Mako steps out. Her presence is both a signal and a siren call, an invitation to enter a dream woven from silk and shadow. Along the narrow streets, men pause mid-conversation to watch her pass. Some lower their eyes in deference. Others allow a brief moment of admiration to flicker across their faces before they continue their hurried steps. She floats past them, her wooden okobo clogs echoing like distant temple bells. Inside the tea house, she kneels, greeting each guest with a bow so fluid it resembles a willow branch bending in the wind. Her every move is a performance. The way she pours sake without spilling a single drop, how she laughs softly at a patron's worn-out joke, the tilt of her head when listening to a story she has heard countless times, but feigns as if hearing it anew. In these gatherings, she is both participant and phantom, present yet untouchable. The patrons leave with the illusion of intimacy, believing they have glimpsed the woman behind the paint. In truth, they have seen only reflections in a moonlit pond. When she finally returns to the ukiyo, hours after midnight, she removes each layer of her attire, as though shedding different versions of herself. The silence of her small room embraces her like a forgotten lullaby. She sits before her mirror one last time, her hand hesitating before removing the final traces of white makeup. In this pause, there lies a quiet yearning, a question she dares not voice. Who is she without the layers, the fans, the laughter? Her reflection offers no answer, only the steady gaze of a woman who has learned to survive within an empire of illusion. She lowers her eyes, wipes away the white paint, and exhales deeply. In that fragile moment before sleep claims her, she allows a single thought to surface. Tomorrow she will rise again, step into the silent dance of mirrors and moonlight, and continue weaving her life into the invisible tapestry that holds the Hanamakai together. As the morning sun slowly rises above Edo's tiled rooftops, the Hanamachi world stirs beneath the mist, like an underwater city just coming into focus. Each breath of the new day carries a thin veil of incense, wood smoke, and the faint sweetness of morning plum blossoms. The world outside is loud, chaotic. Fishmongers cry their wares. Samurai pass with measured steps, and children chase each other through dusty alleyways. But behind the sliding screens of the ukiyo, time moves differently. Here, the moments flow like a gentle stream, each ripple precise and orchestrated. In this hidden universe, a young Mako kneels before her sensei, her forehead grazing the tatami in a deep bow. She is here not only to learn songs or dances, but to master something infinitely harder, the art of becoming invisible. This is a paradox at the heart of the geisha life. On stage, she must be radiant enough to draw every gaze. Yet in daily life, she must move so gracefully, so quietly, that she nearly ceases to exist outside her defined role. The training begins with walking. Not the simple act of moving from one place to another, but the meticulous choreography of each footstep. The sensei corrects her stance endlessly, the angle of her ankle, the softness in her knee, the tension in her shoulder that betrays nervousness. The goal is to appear as though she glides effortlessly across a wooden floor, as silent as a falling petal. Next is the art of sitting. How to fold into seiza without a creak from her joints or a ripple in her kimono. how to rise in one smooth motion, like mist lifting from a still pond. Every movement is a poem, each stanza composed of hidden struggles, the sting of cramped legs, the ache that coils around her spine, the weight of layers upon layers of silk. Between lessons, she practices her calligraphy. The ink brush is another tool of her transformation. Its strokes must be as fluid and deliberate as her dance. The black ink glides across rice paper in elegant curves, echoing the path her body must follow on the stage. Each character is a small confession, an offering to the gods of discipline and patience. In the afternoon, the sensei teaches her the subtle craft of conversation. Here, silence is as vital as speech. She learns when to nod, when to laugh softly, when to pause just long enough to make her listener feel heard without revealing too much of herself. The art of reply is a gentle fog. It offers shape, but never allows one to see clearly through it. The Mako also studies the nuanced language of the fan. A sudden flick can signal surprise. A slow, downward sweep can convey sadness. Hidden behind its painted surface, her eyes become stars twinkling from behind thin clouds. After hours of training, her body hums with exhaustion, but her mind is sharpened to a fine blade. She learns to carry this inner tension gracefully, to smile through it, to turn it into an invisible performance that only her sisters and sensei can truly see. As twilight approaches, the ukiyo fills with quiet preparations for the night ahead. Each sister readies her attire, the rustle of silk whispering through narrow corridors. In these moments, they help each other arrange obi sashes, adjust hair ornaments, and offer small, hushed encouragements. Despite the competitive nature of their world, there is an unspoken bond, a collective understanding that each woman stands on the same trembling bridge between self and illusion. They share silent glances, brief touches on the sleeve, and fleeting smiles that speak volumes without words. When the Mako finally stands fully adorned, she becomes almost unrecognizable even to herself. The thick white makeup blurs her features. The blackened teeth mark her marital status or career stage, and the layered kimono transforms her body into an unfolding scroll of hidden stories. As she steps outside, her mind rehearses every gesture, every phrase she will deliver tonight. She carries not only her own dreams, but also the dreams of her patrons, her ukiyo, her family back home who once sold her to the Hanamachi with hopes of future prosperity. Along the lantern-lit alleys, shadows stretch long and tremble like koi beneath moonlight. The sound of her okobo clogs marks her passage, echoing softly against the walls lined with ivy and paper lanterns. When she arrives at the Oshaya, the tea house, she is greeted with practiced warmth. Inside, she becomes a performer of 1,000 subtle plays. She listens to an old merchant boast about rice harvests, giggles at a young samurai's poem, pours sake with the grace of a flowing stream. She is simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, the embodiment of beauty, yet devoid of personal claim to it. Each encounter becomes a fragile dance. She offers just enough warmth to ignite the illusion of connection, but never enough to reveal the flickering flame beneath. Each laugh is carefully tuned to soothe egos, each compliment strategically placed like a camellia in a midnight garden. As the evening deepens, the men become looser with their words, lulled by sake and their own imagined closeness to the geisha beside them. But she remains vigilant, weaving the night like an intricate tapestry of shadows and light. When the final cups are drained and the guests stumble out into the pale moonlight, she remains behind to tidy the tatami room. She folds away the fans, smooths the creases on the floor cushions, gathers stray strands of hairpin ornaments left behind in the rush of goodbyes. Only when she returns to the ukiyo, slipping through the wooden threshold like a returning spirit, does she allow the tension to dissolve. She kneels before her mirror once more, staring into the depths of her painted face. In that silent reflection, she catches a glimpse of something raw and fleeting, the young girl who once dreamed of becoming a dancer, not for wealthy patrons, but beneath open skies, free from expectations. Yet the dream drifts away as quickly as it surfaced, absorbed into the layers of white, red, and black. She closes her eyes, listens to the gentle creak of the ukiyo settling into sleep, and exhales a single silent promise to herself. Tomorrow, she will rise and disappear again, perfectly, invisibly. As dawn stretches its pale fingers over the rooftops of Edo, the ukiyo slowly exhales from its nocturnal rhythm. Before the world outside even stirs, a geisha's day begins in the quiet hours when the moon still clings to the sky, reluctant to depart. The first ritual is to cleanse the body and spirit. In the wooden bath, steam coils like ancient calligraphy, wrapping around her as she kneels beside a basin. The water is lukewarm, never indulgently hot, and scented subtly with pine needles or crushed chrysanthemums. Each stroke of the cloth across her skin is an invocation, not merely to remove sweat or dust, but to wash away the masks of the previous night. Yet, even here, privacy is an illusion. The ukiyo's walls are thin, and other sisters slip silently past, careful not to disturb, but always aware. Every glance, every overheard whisper, forms an invisible tapestry of hierarchy and unspoken judgments. After the bath, she faces the mirror again. The painted face she wears to the evening parties is stripped clean, revealing skin marked by hours beneath heavy makeup. A small patch of redness, where the hair ornaments dug into her scalp, faint lines at the corners of her lips from holding delicate smiles. Too long a bruise she hides beneath layers of powder. Each mark is a quiet ledger of her survival. Her hair must be restyled every few days, a ritual that is both an art and an ordeal. She reclines on a wooden headrest at night to preserve elaborate coiffures, a balancing act that turns sleep into a kind of vigilant meditation. The pins, combs, and waxed pieces hold more than shape. They carry messages about her rank, her training, and her emotional availability. Each kanzashi ornament, chosen carefully, can say more than any spoken sentence. Once prepared, she joins the other women for a sparse breakfast of rice, miso soup, and pickled vegetables. The meal is quiet, almost ceremonial. Chopsticks tap lightly against bowls, a gentle percussion in the stillness. Conversations, if they occur, are brief and practical. Reminders of appointments, quiet requests for a borrowed hair comb, a discreet nod to a sore ankle after a long night of dance. As the day unfolds, she turns to lessons. Not just music and dance, but the continuous honing of subtle arts, poetry, calligraphy, and the skill of reading a room with the delicacy of a crane stepping across shallow water. The shamisen practice is perhaps the most taxing. Her fingers ache as they pluck and press, each note trembling into the air like a silken thread. The teacher's stern eyes catch every tremor of hesitation, every breath taken a moment too soon. Between lessons, she tends to the upkeep of her personal accessories. Silk obi sashes must be brushed and aired. Delicate perfume sachets refreshed with new incense. Even her small items, hairpins, fans, lacquered boxes, are arranged precisely. Each object is a silent partner in her nightly dance, and their maintenance is as crucial as her own. But the hours of daylight are not entirely filled with performance and practice. There are moments of introspection too. In her private chamber, she kneels by the low window and looks out over the narrow alley. She watches merchants trundle carts of fish, listens to the echo of a storyteller's voice drifting from a nearby tea house. Sometimes she scribbles poems on scraps of rice paper, tiny haiku that capture fleeting feelings. A pale moon rises, beneath the silk sleeve, warmth of yesterday's laugh. These poems are rarely shared. They are small lanterns she lights only for herself, soft glows against the vast darkness of duty. Visitors occasionally arrive in the afternoon, tailors bringing new kimono designs, patrons with gifts or payment, old friends seeking a brief audience. Each meeting is performed with controlled grace, every bow calculated, every smile weighted. As the sun slides toward the horizon, preparations for the evening resume. Her kimono for the night is chosen carefully, each layer reflecting the season, the event's formality, and her own subtle message. The outermost robe might feature cascading wisteria to echo spring or bold chrysanthemums to declare resilience in autumn. Dressing is an intricate dance in itself. The underlayers are tied so snug they restrict deep breathing, a bodily metaphor for her social role. Each layer is smoothed, folded, and tightened with precision, the final knot of the obi standing as a silent fortress across her back. Then comes the makeup, an act of transformation so complete that it resembles the construction of a mask rather than mere adornment. The white base, thick and cool, erases the lines of individuality. Red accents at the eyes and lips draw the gaze while simultaneously holding secrets. Black outlines sharpen her expressions, creating a face both alluring and impenetrable. Before stepping into the corridor, she adjusts her obi once more, straightens the hair ornaments, and exhales, not in relief, but as a quiet signal to herself that she is ready to disappear into her role once again. As she moves through the ukiyo's wooden hallways, the boards creak gently, echoing her silent resolve. She passes younger Maiko, who watch her with wide eyes, absorbing each detail of her preparation. They see not just a woman adorned, but a living scripture of what they might become. Beautiful, admired, and yet endlessly scrutinized. Outside, the lanterns are already lit, casting pools of amber light that sway softly in the evening breeze. Each glow seems to whisper old songs, echoes of laughter, the ghosts of past patrons long gone. When she arrives at the tea house tonight, she will sit beside men who believe they know her, that her smiles are just for them, her glances full of private meaning. But she knows otherwise. Every word, every small laugh, every delicate sip of sake is rehearsed. As the night deepens, she will retreat into the comforting repetition of her craft. A plucked note on the shamisen, a flick of the fan, a graceful pour of tea. The audience sees an effortless charm, but within, her mind keeps a ledger of each obligation, the patron she must flatter, the elder she must respect, the rival she must outshine without ever appearing to compete. Near midnight, as the last guests drift into the darkness, she will bow them out with an immaculate composure. Then, at last, she will walk the winding path back to the ukiyo, under a sky stippled with faint stars. In those rare, empty moments between duty and dawn, she becomes almost herself again, the shadow of a young girl who once played at the edge of a river, her hair loose and her laughter unbound. But tomorrow, she will rise before the moon has set, bathe in cool water, scented with pine, and build her invisible walls once more. This cycle of performance and concealment is her quiet fortress, a silken prison she both nurtures and resists. As the first hush of dawn arrives, slipping gently across the tiled rooftops of Edo, she rises from her thin bedding. The wooden headrest has kept her elaborate hair intact, but her neck aches, and her shoulders feel as if they carry 1,000 folded secrets. Each day begins with the same silent question. Who am I today? Perhaps she will be the gentle confidante, her eyes full of softness and careful pauses. Or maybe she must be the witty, elusive muse who parries every joke with a sharper one of her own. These are roles she rehearses endlessly, sometimes alone in her small room, sometimes silently, as she watches her own reflection in the darkened surface of a lacquered box. The first ritual is dressing, even if no guests await yet. The underlayers of kimono are wrapped tight, binding her ribs just enough to keep her spine straight and her breath shallow. In these moments, she feels the paradox of her life, bound and beautiful, fragile and formidable. Throughout the day, preparations weave through the air like thin incense smoke. A visiting hairdresser carefully oils and resets her hair, adjusting each kanzashi pin to catch the lantern light Later that evening, silk sashes are unfolded, checked for stains and small tears. The delicate threads are brushed gently, for a single loose fiber can shatter the illusion of immaculate perfection. Mid-morning, she joins the other geisha and maiko for lessons. In a sunlit corner of the ukiyo, she sits seiza, legs folded beneath her, as a shamisen teacher tunes the strings with quiet authority. The sound of the plectrum striking the strings is crisp, echoing in the wooden room like drops of rain on a pond. She practices the melancholic chords of an old love song, a ballad of two cranes separated by a storm. Each note is a whisper of longing, a confession she cannot make in words. Her teacher's eyes narrow with each slip, each faltering breath, but she keeps going, fingers trembling but resolute. When the music practice ends, she moves to the dance hall, where the tatami mats hold the ghostly prints of countless feet before hers. The dance instructor corrects the angle of her wrist, the tilt of her head, the arc of her fan, as it unfolds like a paper moon. Dancing, more than music, demands that she forget her own weight, that she disappear into the floating illusion of grace. Her feet ache, her knees threaten rebellion, but outwardly, she remains a flowing silhouette of serenity. In the afternoon, there is calligraphy. She grips the slender brush between her fingers, watching ink bleed slowly into the rice paper. Each stroke must be deliberate, but appear effortless, an echo of her life itself. Sometimes, as she writes a poem or a guest's name, she imagines the ink as blood, each character a vein branching into silence. It is a meditation, a quiet grief that she can control line by line. Once lessons end, she returns to her small room. Here, in the pause before twilight, she is allowed to sit alone. She listens to the muffled bustle beyond the sliding doors. A maid scolding a young maiko for spilling tea, a tailor's soft chatter as he delivers new obi, the rustle of a paper lantern being carried upstairs. In this momentary stillness, she lets her mind wander beyond the walls of the ukiyo. She imagines walking beneath the cherry blossoms by the river, the petals falling into her open hands like fragile confessions. She remembers childhood games in narrow alleys, the laughter of girls who still believed in the possibility of a life beyond performance. But the spell breaks quickly. A knock at the door, a soft voice reminding her of tonight's appointments. She rises and begins the slow transformation once more. The layers of kimono go on one by one, each fold a small surrender. The final layer, the outer kimono, shimmers with embroidered cranes and waves, symbols of endurance and unending cycles. Makeup is next. The cool white base, the sharp red at the corners of her lips, the black lines stretching her eyes into an unblinking gaze. The transformation is so thorough that even she forgets the shape of her own bare face. By the time she is ready, the world outside has shifted. Lanterns glow along the streets, illuminating drifting figures in layered silk and the soft laughter of passing patrons. At the tea house tonight, she must entertain a merchant rumored to be both generous and quick-tempered. She studies his profile silently as he jokes with a companion, her mind working like an abacus behind the painted smile. Every tilt of her head, every flutter of her fan, every measured sip of sake is performed to keep his mood light, to turn each passing second into an invisible thread binding him to the ukiyo. A geisha's charm is not in words alone, but in the subtle space between them, a raised eyebrow that suggests knowingness, a glance that promises nothing yet hints at everything. At times, the room's laughter rises around her like a tide, but she remains in the center, a solitary lantern afloat. While guests lose themselves in sake and stories, she listens to every shift in the air, every stray breath, every emotion concealed in a half-finished sentence. There is a danger in misreading, in pushing a joke too far or withdrawing too soon. The wrong move can cost a night's favor, or worse, a patron's continued support. Tonight, as the hour stretches toward midnight, the merchant finally sighs contentedly. waving away his remaining sake and asking her to sing. She picks up the shamisen, fingers finding their place as if they belong there more than on her own skin. The song begins low, a lament of a woman waiting for her lover's return across the endless waves. Her voice is soft but unwavering, slipping between each note like silk through fingers. The guests fall silent, eyes heavy with the melancholy she conjures. She does not sing for them, not truly. She sings for the echo inside her, for the memory of a girl who once sang to the moon in secret. When the song ends, the room exhales in quiet reverence. Applause is polite, muted by the weight of the moment. She bows low, forehead brushing the tatami, hiding her fleeting sadness beneath layers of etiquette. Afterward, as she walks home beneath the thin sliver of moonlight, she feels the exhaustion blooming through her limbs. Every muscle, every breath, carries the residue of the evening's labor. But even as she returns to the ukiyo, even as she unties the stiff obi and wipes away the last traces of white paint, she is already rehearsing for tomorrow. For tomorrow, she will rise again before dawn. She will soak in the steam of the morning bath, watch the thin lines of ink flow across paper, glide across tatami in silent dances, and transform once more into the woman they all believe they see. In this endless cycle, there is no clear line between who she is and who she must become. The distinction dissolves like ink in rainwater, leaving only the pale shadow of a geisha, kneeling in the dark, listening to the night breathe. As the dawn mist hovers low above Edo's narrow alleys, she stirs from restless sleep. Her dreams are often thin veils, stitched from fragments of songs, half-finished letters, and long corridors lined with silent faces. Each morning she wakes, unsure if she truly slept or merely drifted in another kind of performance. The wooden headdress has held her hair in place, but it has also pressed secrets into her neck. She rises carefully, trying not to disturb the carefully arranged coiffure. Outside her shoshi screen, the first soft calls of morning merchants break the silence. The tofu seller's low chant, the rhythmic clack of a wooden bucket against a well. She washes her face in a small basin, the water cold enough to startle her into alertness. In the reflection, she studies her face before the makeup transforms it. Softer, unguarded, almost unfamiliar. It is in these fleeting, private moments that she sees the young girl she once was, the daughter of a tailor who used to slip away at dusk to watch the river. But there is no time to linger in the past. The schedule begins before the city fully wakes. Lessons in music and dance continue endlessly. Each repetition is a silent mantra, each corrected movement a small offering to the gods of discipline. In the music room, she sits seiza, fingers trembling on the shamisen strings. Her teacher watches with hawk-like precision. One note too sharp, one breath too hurried, and the stern rebuke will echo louder than the instrument itself. When the lesson ends, she stands to practice dance alone, moving through slow, careful poses that require not just muscle, but a stillness of spirit. In these movements, she must remember to become more than herself. She must transform into a vessel of beauty, an embodiment of refined tradition. Later in the day, she is summoned to rehearse poetry recitation. The words fall from her lips like petals, each syllable designed to land delicately. Poetry is not only about rhythm or rhyme. It is about holding the listener's heart suspended in the fragile space between lines. As she recites verses of fleeting blossoms and moonlit longing, she feels her own heart pulse beneath the layers of silk and etiquette. For a moment, the poems feel personal, as if written for her secret loneliness. But the illusion breaks quickly, for these words belong to everyone, to patrons, to the other geisha, to the passing seasons. Afternoons are often filled with fittings. New kimono arrive from master weavers, each piece an intricate tapestry of hidden meanings. The fabric is heavy with woven cranes, waves, chrysanthemums, each motif whispering promises of luck, longevity, or subtle defiance. She stands as the dresser circles her, adjusting folds, pinning sashes, smoothing stubborn creases. In these quiet sessions, she feels like a doll, her flesh secondary to the artistry draped over it. Sometimes she exchanges glances with the dresser, an older woman who once performed on these same streets. In those silent looks, there is a shared understanding, a silent conversation about sacrifice, survival, and the bittersweet joy of being admired, yet never truly seen. As twilight edges closer, preparations for the evening begin. The makeup, an elaborate ritual in itself, demands patience beyond measure. White paste is layered, transforming her skin into a blank canvas. Red is brushed at the lips and around the eyes, reshaping her expressions into symbols of playful elegance. Once adorned, she resembles a living painting. But beneath the powdered face lies the echo of countless emotions. Worry about a patron's shifting affections. The ache of old love letters hidden in a wooden box, the yearning for a world beyond the narrow lantern-lit streets. Tonight's engagement is at a private banquet for a high-ranking samurai. His reputation precedes him, courteous, but with a sharp tongue that can wound deeper than any blade. At the tea house, she enters with practiced steps, head slightly bowed, fan half open to conceal fleeting expressions. Every movement is orchestrated, every glance a note in a silent melody that only she can hear. As she pours sake, she listens to the samurai's measured words. His stories of court politics drift across the room like slow smoke. He jokes about rival lords, about battles that never truly end, about the burden of power carried silently beneath the armor. She nods in the right places, her laughter timed like a soft percussion. But in her mind, she drifts to quieter places. Moonlit gardens, the scent of fresh plum blossoms, the warmth of spring rain against her bare shoulders. The samurai requests a dance. She stands and moves to the center of the room, her sleeves brushing softly against the tatami. The music begins, a slow, haunting tune carried by a single flute. Her body becomes a story, a love unfulfilled, a farewell unspoken, a dream that dissolves before dawn. Each gesture is a poem without words, each step a silent confession to the universe. As she spins lightly, the room's attention tightens around her, drawn into the invisible threads of her movements. For these moments, she holds power, not as a warrior, but as a delicate tempest no sword can contain. When the dance ends, she lowers herself to the floor, forehead touching the mat in humble reverence. The applause is restrained, fitting the measured dignity of the gathering. But she feels it vibrate beneath her ribs, a small echo of validation for the hours, the years, the lifetimes sacrificed to perfect this fleeting art. The night stretches on with gentle conversation, quiet drinking games, and subdued laughter. Outside, lanterns bob in the night breeze, their glow reflected in puddles like small wavering moons. When she finally leaves, escorted back to the ukiyo by a young attendant, the world feels both infinite and crushingly small. The scent of burnt charcoal, the distant sound of a shamisen from another house, the whisper of a passing stray cat, all reminders that while she shines in borrowed light, her true self remains hidden beneath layers of ink and silk. In her room, she unties the obi slowly, fingers numb from holding fans and sake cups for hours. The white makeup peels away under a damp cloth, revealing the woman beneath, tired, marked by small blemishes, her eyes heavy with unspoken words. She stares at her reflection, wondering if there is a line where the geisha ends and the woman begins. Perhaps there is none. Perhaps she is both, an ever-shifting blend of shadow and lantern glow. As she finally slides under her thin covers, the city outside hums with secrets. Tonight, her dreams may carry her into the moonlit streets of Kyoto, or to a quiet mountain temple where no one knows her name. Yet when the sun returns, she will rise again, shoulders straight, voice steady, smile painted anew. The cycle repeats, as inevitable as the turning of seasons, as quiet as a falling petal on an empty stage. Imagine a house where every sound is softened by tatami floors, every breath watched by ancestors peering down from painted scrolls, every step measured as if it echoes across centuries. This is her world, the ukiyo, a geisha house that is part sanctuary, part labyrinth, and part unspoken prison. The ukiyo is ruled by the okasan, the mother, a title that conceals more than it reveals. To outsiders, she is a benevolent guardian who raises young women into poised artists. But within the paper-thin walls, she is both mentor and judge, holding bets and destinies in her lacquered fingers. Every girl who enters the ukiyo carries her own story, a father's last gamble, a mother's final tearful goodbye, or a family's silent hope pinned on her fragile shoulders. Once inside, her old name fades like mist. She receives a new name, sometimes chosen by the okazan, sometimes suggested by a senior geisha whose favor can shape her entire future. In the ukiyo, she is never truly alone, yet she is always isolated. The house bustles with whispered gossip, the quiet rustle of silk sleeves, the soft plink of shamisen practice drifting from distant rooms. The other geisha are not simply sisters. They are rivals in a perpetual dance for patrons, for prestige, for survival. The daily rhythm here is as strict as it is delicate. Mornings start before the first bird call, with silent chores performed in near darkness. Polishing wooden floors, folding kimono, refilling water jars. Each task is an act of discipline, a ritual cleansing of both the house and the mind. Breakfast is simple. A small bowl of rice, pickled vegetables, perhaps a sliver of grilled fish, if the house's finances allow. The meal is taken in silence, each girl lost in private thoughts. A missed step in yesterday's dance, a harsh rebuke from okasan, the rumor of a wealthy patron's impending visit. After breakfast, lessons resume. The air fills with the sweet, sharp scent of burning incense and the low, melancholic notes of the shamisen. The Mako, apprentice geisha, repeat basic dance forms over and over, toes curling painfully in tight wooden okobo sandals. Senior geisha glide past them, correcting stances with a single raised eyebrow or a quiet clearing of the throat. Between lessons, the girls practice conversational arts. A geisha's true weapon is not her fan or her kimono, but her ability to weave words into silk threads that wrap around a patron's mind. They memorize stories, practice witticisms, study subtle changes in dialect and tone. In these small details, they learn to mirror desires unspoken and read laughter that is only half meant. A geisha does not merely entertain. She must sense when a guest wants jokes as light as drifting cherry blossoms or when he seeks comfort hidden between lines of poetry. In the afternoons, sewing rooms come alive with the quiet murmur of needles slipping through silk. A geisha's wardrobe is an arsenal of silent statements. Bright hues for summer festivals, muted grays for melancholy autumn evenings, fierce crimson when she wishes to signal inner fire. Every kimono tells a story. A placement of cranes along a hem might hint at loyalty and longevity. A hidden motif inside a sleeve could suggest a longing for distant love. Even the way an obi is tied can whisper secrets, whether she is welcoming company or fending off unwanted advances. As the sun slides toward the horizon, preparations for the evening engagements begin. Tonight, perhaps, she will accompany a wealthy merchant known for his unpredictable moods. Or perhaps she will perform for a group of visiting daimyo officials, their hearts heavy with duty, seeking fleeting warmth in a world of stone-faced politics. She sits before her mirror, transforming again. The act is both art and armor. Layers of white face powder erase the fragile lines of fatigue. Dark eyeliner draws new depths around her eyes. Red lips bloom into careful half-smiles. Each stroke is a small exorcism, chasing away the raw edges of doubt, replacing them with porcelain composure. The final touch is the kanzashi, ornate hairpins that crown her head. Some are seasonal, shaped like plum blossoms or irises, while others are gifts from patrons, each carrying whispers of private meetings and half-forgotten promises. When she stands, fully adorned, the room seems to pause for a heartbeat. The transformation is complete. The young woman who once watched river reflections now stands as a living embodiment of Edo as refined dreams and collective yearnings. Outside the ukiyo, rickshaws wait like silent dragons, ready to carry her into the neon glow of lantern-lit streets. The city stretches endlessly, a maze of secret gardens, smoky tea houses, and moonlit bridges. Beneath the carefully arranged layers of her persona, she feels the pulse of her own vulnerability, echoing against the lacquered wood and silk. Tonight's venue is a secluded oshaya near the Sumida River. The guests are officials from Kyoto, men of power cloaked in ritual courtesy and subtle threats. As she steps into the room, every glance tightens around her like an invisible cord. She bows deeply, her forehead nearly touching the tatami. With each precise movement, she offers not just entertainment, but a momentary escape from the heavy weight of politics and ancestral expectations. As sake cups fill and laughter drifts like pale smoke, she plays the shamisen. Her fingers dance across the strings, summoning tales of star-crossed lovers and distant mountain winds. The sound is at once tender and melancholy, like a voice calling across the ages. A guest requests a poem, and she recites it softly, her eyes lowered. The words drift into the air, weaving around the candlelight. A love that lingers beyond lifetimes, a moon that waits patiently for a beloved who will never return. In those small silences after each line, the men's eyes shimmer with reflections of lost loves and unfinished dreams. Here, she becomes more than a performer. She becomes the echo of their own unspoken vulnerabilities. Later, as she guides a drinking game, laughter returns. A guest dares to tease her, asking if she has ever truly loved. She tilts her head, fan half raised, and replies with a smile that is both knowing and infinitely distant. The moment passes, but something raw flickers behind her painted eyes. Hours slip by in a tapestry of small rituals. The night thickens, shadows grow long, and the oshaya hums with low conversations and fading warmth. As she returns to the ukiyo past midnight, the lanterns seem to sway with ghostly rhythm. The air is cool, scented faintly of pine and river reeds. She steps inside, removes her kanzashi slowly, the pins clicking softly like distant bells. Alone in her room, she sits on her knees, unwrapping the layers of her kimono, piece by piece, like peeling away seasons. Beneath it all, her skin is marked by the faint red lines left by tight sashes, silent proof of the hours spent sculpting herself into perfection. She stares at her reflection again. The woman who remains is both herself and not. A paradox held within one fragile vessel, the girl who once longed to chase fireflies, and the geisha who can hold a room's breath with a single glance. As the candle burns lower, she thinks of the river beyond the walls, of the moonlight that washes over the water in restless silver waves. She thinks of the stories she told tonight, the smiles she borrowed, and the secrets she tucked beneath her robe. Finally, she lies down, her body curling gently like an ink brush stroke on washi paper. Sleep comes slowly, as if hesitant to cross the threshold. In her dreams, she walks barefoot along a moonlit garden path, her kimono trailing behind like mist. The air is filled with unseen music, the promise of a world beyond duties and debts. When dawn returns, she will rise again, smooth her sleeves, and step once more into the eternal dance. Imagine a day when you are neither fully awake nor entirely asleep. A day woven from countless rituals, so meticulously repeated that they start to feel like echoes from another life. This is the hidden rhythm of a geisha in Edo, Japan. A life composed of rituals that become incantations, steps that become spells. As dawn bleeds softly over the city's tiled rooftops, she rises quietly. The air is still heavy with night's lingering whispers. Before her feet even touch the tatami, she bows her head in a silent prayer, not to a god of temples, but to the unseen spirits that guard the fragile balance between her private self and the mask she wears. First, the long process of transforming her hair. Her attendant carefully unwraps last night's elaborate arrangements, each pin and comb released like a quiet sigh. The hair is combed, oiled, and twisted into shapes that announce her rank and subtle signals about her availability, her mood, or her relationship with certain patrons. Some mornings, the smell of camellia oil is comforting, a gentle anchor to something feminine and personal. Other mornings, it feels like a cage, binding her strands into an identity she cannot fully claim as her own. When her hair is finally set, she begins the art of layering the kimono. There is an almost spiritual serenity in the slow unfolding of each layer. The soft undergarments, the crisp white collar, the vividly colored robes that shimmer like a koi pond in spring. Today she chooses a pale blue kimono, embroidered with cranes flying toward an unseen moon. Each stitch echoes a hope for longevity and grace. The obi, the broad sash that both defines and confines, is tied with exquisite precision, pulling her spine into a posture as dignified as a willow standing against river winds. Once dressed, she moves to the main hall, where the day's lessons await. Even as a fully fledged geisha, she must practice continuously. A geisha's craft is never complete. It is a garden that must be pruned, watered, and tended without end. Calligraphy practice comes first. Black ink, thick and slightly fragrant, glides across the rice paper. Each stroke demands a quiet mind, a steady breath, and an unwavering focus. In these moments, she feels closest to her truest self, a self that exists beyond debts and obligations, beyond the weight of gazes that expect only perfection. Next comes the tea ceremony rehearsal. Every movement, from the tilt of her wrist to the angle of her bow, must be both natural and impossibly refined. The art of serving tea is not about quenching thirst. It is about offering a moment of timeless serenity. The bowl becomes a universe, the steam a fleeting cloud, the guest a transient moon reflected on water. Some afternoons, lessons move to music and dance. Today, she practices a slow, melancholic piece, her shamisen weeping in delicate, trembling notes. The melody recounts an old folk tale of a crane that transforms into a woman to repay a kindness, weaving cloth from her own feathers until she fades into nothing. As she plays, her mind drifts to her own fate. How often has she given pieces of herself, laughter, secrets, careful touches of her hand on a guest's sleeve, until they vanish into the air like the crane's feathers? In the evenings, she is expected to entertain guests again. Tonight, she accompanies a group of merchants who have just arrived from Osaka. Their talk is of rice shipments, droughts, market prices, and the fragile balance of power among daimyo lords. But beneath these words lies a shared longing, the desire to escape the harshness of coin-counting lives, if only for a few stolen hours. She listens, gently guiding the conversation toward lighter topics when voices grow too sharp. At the right moment, she offers a small joke, her fan snapping open like a dragonfly's wings. Laughter follows, but it is a careful, orchestrated laughter, not the chaotic mirth of common steakhouses, but the dignified ripple of men who know their laughter is being witnessed. Between drinks, she pours each guest's sake, tilting her wrist just so, her eyes flicking upward for a half-second of silent connection. Those brief glances carry entire poems, questions unasked, wounds unspoken, comforts never fully claimed. As the night deepens, she performs a fan dance, the flickering lanterns casting shadowy patterns across her kimono. In each turn and sway, she becomes less a woman and more an ephemeral wisp of moonlight, a living ink painting set into motion. When a guest becomes bold, perhaps reaching for her sleeve or offering words too forward, She must navigate this tightrope of grace and deflection. A gentle withdrawal, a lowered gaze, a small, practiced laugh. These are her shields, polished through countless nights of performance. She knows that beneath every silk robe in the room, beneath every layer of etiquette and poetry, there is a fragile loneliness that clings to each man like a hidden bruise. And she, with her painted smile and whispered jokes, is the temporary salve they come to seek. After the guests depart, she remains in the oshaya, overseeing the final clearing of dishes and folding of tatami cushions. She thanks the staff softly, her voice nearly merging with the sound of the autumn wind rustling through bamboo blinds. Back in her private room, she unbinds her hair in slow, almost ceremonial movements. The elaborate knots give way to soft waves that cascade around her shoulders. A momentary glimpse of the young girl who once dared to dream of writing poems rather than living inside them. She rubs her wrists where the tight obi left faint impressions, tiny lines that feel like ghostly chains. She breathes deeply, inhaling the faint sweetness of her kimono's stored cedar scent. Before sleeping, she writes a few lines of poetry on washi paper. By lantern's glow, 1,000 faces pass. Beneath the silk, my silent shadow laughs. She folds the paper and places it inside a small lacquered box, a private archive of thoughts never shared aloud. Finally, as she lies beneath her futon, the city's distant echoes, the soft clatter of wooden clogs, the fading laughter of late-night revelers, wash over her. Her eyes drift shut slowly, as though reluctant to abandon the small island of stillness she has carved out of her day. In dreams, she walks under moonlit wisteria, her bare feet silent on dewy stones, each step a gentle rebellion against the endless dance of expectations. The moon follows her, patient and silent, as she traces invisible patterns into the air with her fingers. Tomorrow, the rituals will begin again. The hairpins, the silk layers, the practiced jokes, and concealed sighs. But for tonight, she exists beyond them, if only for the length of a single, unguarded breath. Imagine standing before a mirror that reflects not only your face, but every secret you've ever whispered to the night. This is the mirror a geisha holds each evening, a silent witness to every polite bow, every cautious smile, every fleeting glance she trades for admiration or survival. Tonight, after another evening of laughter and music, she sits alone, slowly wiping away the white oshiroi powder that masks her skin. The brush strokes backward, revealing the quiet landscape beneath, a face that belongs more to the moon than to any living soul. Removing the heavy makeup is an intimate ritual, almost a reverse of armor. The bright red lips fade first, transforming from the shape of a beckoning flower into the bare softness of solitude. The blackened brows melt into her natural line, more gentle, more hesitant. It is here, in this moment, that she feels the fragile edge between her constructed self and her private self, two silhouettes crossing paths in the lamplight. Outside, the city of Edo simmers beneath layers of sake-drenched laughter and the deep hush of merchants closing their shutters. The paper lantern still swings softly, casting restless shadows on the wooden walls. She listens to the distant clatter of geta sandals and the muffled calls of night vendors, selling roasted sweet potatoes and freshly grilled fish to passing drunks. In the quiet room, her mind drifts to memories from before the ukiyo, before the endless practice, before the debt ledger, before she learned to keep her eyes low, but her senses high. She remembers running through her childhood village fields, the smell of warm earth on her fingertips, her mother's call echoing from the porch. But even in those memories, the seeds of duty had already sprouted. Her parents spoke in hushed tones at night, worried about rice taxes, about the landlord's sudden visit, about the price of a daughter who could ease the family's burdens by entering the city's floating world. A geisha's life is often compared to a flower, blooming briefly under the moon, admired by all, but rooted in silent, unseen soil. Tonight, she feels that metaphor most keenly. After cleaning her face, she opens a small chest containing her few personal treasures. Letters from past patrons, pressed wildflowers, a chipped ceramic cat figurine her mother gave her as a child. She lifts each item tenderly, as though they are small talismans protecting a self she no longer dares to show publicly. She runs her fingers over an old fan, its edges frayed, the painted peonies faded from countless dances. This fan once accompanied her first solo performance. She remembers that night clearly. The terrifying hush before she stepped onto the polished floor, the trembling in her fingers that only stopped when the first notes of the shamisen rang out. That dance had earned her not just coins, but whispers of admiration. Those whispers, like soft feathers brushing her cheek, had been enough to convince her that all the sacrifices were worth it. But years later, she wonders, were they really hers to keep, or just fleeting illusions cast by paper lantern light? On another night, she once hosted a samurai lord visiting from the provinces. He was tall, his presence like a silent storm in the room. Unlike the merchants, he rarely laughed. Instead, he watched intently, unwaveringly, as though trying to peel away her practiced jokes and layered silks to find the small, unpainted girl beneath. When he finally spoke, it was to recite a waka poem about a lone crane standing in the mist, unable to choose between flying north or remaining by the frozen pond. She had smiled, responded with a poem of her own, each syllable carefully chosen to reveal nothing and everything at once. He left the next morning, leaving behind a folded paper crane and a scent of pine. She kept that crane, now tucked in the corner of her treasure chest, a pale remnant of a moment, both sharper and softer than any dagger. Sometimes, when alone, she allows herself to unfold it, tracing each crease with trembling fingers, whispering the poem to herself under her breath, a soft incantation against loneliness. Tonight, after revisiting these fragments of memory, she stands and opens the shoshi screen slightly. The moonlight spills into her room, transforming the tatami into a pool of silver. She steps forward, feeling the cold night air wrap around her like an old friend. She imagines that the moon understands her in ways no human ever can. The quiet endurance, the subtle shifts of light and shadow, the silent watchfulness over a world that rarely looks up. In that moonlit pause, she forgets the exact weight of her debt, the expected bows, the precise flick of her wrist when serving sake. In this rare suspension of identity, she exists simply as a woman who has endured, who has laughed and wept behind painted lips, who has offered 1,000 silent kindnesses to men who may never recall her real name. Then she whispers a single phrase into the night, not quite prayer, not quite confession. Let tomorrow be gentle. The city beyond her is already shifting towards sleep. Vendors extinguish their lanterns. Distant koto strings fade into silence, and the river carries away the last echoes of daytime laughter. She closes the screen, returns to her futon, and curls beneath the thin quilt. In the darkness, her breathing slows, each exhale a quiet surrender. Even the wooden beams above her seem to sigh in sympathy. Somewhere, a temple bell tolls, a low, resonant sound that rolls through the alleys and slides beneath every doorframe. It feels like a soft heartbeat, reminding her that despite everything, she is still here, still breathing, still able to greet another dawn. Before her mind drifts fully into sleep, she imagines a different life, perhaps one by the sea, where the wind smells of salt and freedom, where her hair can blow loose without judgment. In that imagined world, her laugh is not rehearsed. It is wild and unrestrained, echoing over crashing waves. But soon the fantasy dissolves, and she returns to the warmth of her thin quilt, to the steady rhythm of her pulse, to the familiar cradle of her room. Tomorrow, she will rise again, paint her face again, laugh on cue again. But tonight, she simply belongs to herself, hidden beneath layers of silk, stories, and moonlight. Imagine standing before a mirror that reflects not only your face, but every secret you've ever whispered to the night. This is the mirror a geisha holds each evening, a silent witness to every polite bow, every cautious smile, every fleeting glance she trades for admiration or survival. Tonight, after another evening of laughter and music, she sits alone, slowly wiping away the white oshiroi powder that masks her skin. The brush strokes backward, revealing the quiet landscape beneath, a face that belongs more to the moon than to any living soul. Removing the heavy makeup is an intimate ritual, almost a reverse of armor. The bright red lips fade first, transforming from the shape of a beckoning flower into the bare softness of solitude. The blackened brows melt into her natural line, more gentle, more hesitant. It is here, in this moment, that she feels the fragile edge between her constructed self and her private self. Two silhouettes crossing paths in the lamplight. Outside, the city of Edo simmers beneath layers of sake-drenched laughter and the deep hush of merchants closing their shutters. The paper lantern still swings softly, casting restless shadows on the wooden walls. She listens to the distant clatter of geta sandals and the muffled calls of night vendors, selling roasted sweet potatoes and freshly grilled fish to passing drunks. In the quiet room, her mind drifts to memories from before the ukiyo, before the endless practice, before the debt ledger, before she learned to keep her eyes low, but her senses high. She remembers running through her childhood village fields, the smell of warm earth on her fingertips, her mother's call echoing from the porch. But even in those memories, the seeds of duty had already sprouted. Her parents spoke in hushed tones at night, worried about rice taxes, about the landlord's sudden visit, about the price of a daughter who could ease the family's burdens by entering the city's floating world. A geisha's life is often compared to a flower, blooming briefly under the moon, admired by all, but rooted in silent, unseen soil. Tonight, she feels that metaphor most keenly. After cleaning her face, she opens a small chest containing her few personal treasures: letters from past patrons, pressed wildflowers, a chipped ceramic cat figurine her mother gave her as a child. She lifts each item tenderly, as though they are small talismans protecting a self she no longer dares to show publicly. She runs her fingers over an old fan, its edges frayed, the painted peonies faded from countless dances. This fan once accompanied her first solo performance. She remembers that night clearly. The terrifying hush before she stepped onto the polished floor, the trembling in her fingers that only stopped when the first notes of the shamisen rang out. That dance had earned her not just coins, but whispers of admiration. Those whispers, like soft feathers brushing her cheek, had been enough to convince her that all the sacrifices were worth it. But years later, she wonders, were they really hers to keep, or just fleeting illusions cast by paper lantern light? On another night, she once hosted a samurai lord visiting from the provinces. He was tall, his presence like a silent storm in the room. Unlike the merchants, he rarely laughed. Instead, he watched intently, unwaveringly, as though trying to peel away her practiced jokes and layered silks to find the small, unpainted girl beneath. When he finally spoke, it was to recite a waka poem about a lone crane standing in the mist, unable to choose between flying north or remaining by the frozen pond. She had smiled, responded with a poem of her own, each syllable carefully chosen to reveal nothing and everything at once. He left the next morning, leaving behind a folded paper crane and a scent of pine. She kept that crane, now tucked in the corner of her treasure chest, a pale remnant of a moment, both sharper and softer than any dagger. Sometimes, when alone, she allows herself to unfold it, tracing each crease with trembling fingers, whispering the poem to herself under her breath, a soft incantation against loneliness. Tonight, after revisiting these fragments of memory, she stands and opens the shoshi screen slightly. The moonlight spills into her room, transforming the tatami into a pool of silver. She steps forward, feeling the cold night air wrap around her like an old friend. She imagines that the moon understands her in ways no human ever can. The quiet endurance, the subtle shifts of light and shadow, the silent watchfulness over a world that rarely looks up. In that moonlit pause, she forgets the exact weight of her debt, the expected bows, the precise flick of her wrist when serving sake. In this rare suspension of identity, she exists simply as a woman who has endured, who has laughed and wept behind painted lips, who has offered 1,000 silent kindnesses to men who may never recall her real name. Then she whispers a single phrase into the night, not quite prayer, not quite confession. Let tomorrow be gentle. The city beyond her is already shifting towards sleep. Vendors extinguish their lanterns. Distant koto strings fade into silence, and the river carries away the last echoes of daytime laughter. She closes the screen, returns to her futon, and curls beneath the thin quilt. In the darkness, her breathing slows, each exhale a quiet surrender. Even the wooden beams above her seem to sigh in sympathy. Somewhere, a temple bell tolls, a low, resonant sound that rolls through the alleys and slides beneath every doorframe. It feels like a soft heartbeat, reminding her that despite everything, she is still here, still breathing, still able to greet another dawn. Before her mind drifts fully into sleep, she imagines a different life, perhaps one by the sea, where the wind smells of salt and freedom, where her hair can blow loose without judgment. In that imagined world, her laugh is not rehearsed. It is wild and unrestrained, echoing over crashing waves. But soon the fantasy dissolves, and she returns to the warmth of her thin quilt, to the steady rhythm of her pulse, to the familiar cradle of her room. Tomorrow, she will rise again, paint her face again, laugh on cue again. But tonight, she simply belongs to herself, hidden beneath layers of silk, stories, and moonlight. Dawn in Edo is not a quiet thing. It begins as a low murmur, the creak of merchant carts, the thud of wooden sandals, the calls of fishmongers echoing against rice paper walls. Slowly, it grows into a full-throated chorus, the city breathing into life like a great living creature stretching after a long dream. In the ukiyo, the geisha is already awake before the first crows fly across the pale morning sky. She sits upright, still wrapped in her quilt, staring at the sliding shoshi door as though it might open and reveal a new future. But the door stays closed, and the morning remains patient. She moves to her small mirror again, but today is different. Today, she hesitates before picking up her brush. She lingers, fingers hovering above the lacquered handle as though it might sting her. Last night, in her moonlit conversation with herself, she whispered a secret desire for gentleness. This morning, that wish still clings to her like a ghost. It colors the edges of her thoughts, softens the ache in her joints, quiets the usual flood of anxieties. Yet duty does not pause for daydreams. Soon, the elder woman of the house calls for her, reminding her of today's engagements. A midday tea ceremony for a visiting magistrate, a poetry reading in the afternoon, and a private gathering with 2 wealthy merchants in the evening. She bows her head in acknowledgement, her voice steady as she responds, but inside, her heart feels like a fragile porcelain bowl, hairline cracks threatening to spread with each new obligation. She starts her preparations slowly. The first stroke of white paste on her face feels colder than usual, almost accusing. The crimson on her lips transforms her mouth into a sculpted smile before she even feels ready to inhabit it. Layer after layer, she disappears behind each practiced motion, becoming once more the vessel of perfect poise expected by the world beyond the ukiyo. In the corridor, young Mako shuffle past her, giggling softly, adjusting their obus and rehearsing polite greetings. She watches them, their faces bright with ambition, their steps still light with the possibility of endless tomorrows. She wants to reach out and hold them still, to whisper all she has learned. The heavy price of each compliment, the loneliness hidden in laughter, the ache that blooms quietly when applause fades. But she remains silent, knowing that these lessons cannot be gifted. They must be lived, felt, endured. At the tea ceremony, she kneels for hours, her legs slowly numbing beneath layers of silk. Each movement is deliberate. The tilt of the teacup, the graceful swirl of her sleeve, the gentle placement of a folded paper napkin. Guests smile and nod, praising her elegance. Yet beneath the surface of each bow is a private mantra. Endure, endure. The poetry reading in the afternoon is less rigid, but no less exhausting. She performs subtle dances between lines of verse, her fan flicking open and closed in rhythm with each metaphor. The guests are captivated, their eyes shining with the easy intoxication of cultural luxury. For them, the geisha is an embodiment of living poetry, an aesthetic echo of cherry blossoms drifting on a quiet pond. But for her, each word she recites feels like a petal falling from a branch she cannot grasp. As twilight stains the sky amber and violet, she prepares for the final engagement of the day. Tonight's gathering promises intimacy, a private room, low lantern light, the closeness of conversation that borders on confession. She arrives, escorted into a lacquered chamber, scented with incense and strong rice wine. The two merchants greet her warmly, with the confident familiarity of men who believe their coin and buy sincerity. They ask for songs first. She complies, plucking her shamisen with a delicate strength, her voice weaving through the room like a silk thread in the wind. They watch, mesmerized, caught between admiration and a hunger they dare not speak aloud. Later, they press her for stories, tales of childhood, of her first dance, of whispered rumors she must have heard among the higher echelons of Edo society. She offers them fragments, carefully chosen and polished until they gleam. She makes them laugh at her well-timed jokes, sigh at her feigned vulnerability, lean closer when she lowers her voice into a conspiratorial hush. But inside, she retreats further with each anecdote, moving deeper into an inner garden only she knows. A sanctuary filled with cicada songs, the hush of river reeds, the taste of summer rain on her tongue. A world untouched by patron demands and coin counting. When the final cup is poured, when the last round of laughter fades into tired smiles, she stands to leave. They bow deeply, each believing they have glimpsed something real, each certain they carry away a piece of her. She bows lower, eyes lowered, lips curved in the perfect echo of gratitude. But as she steps back into the corridor, away from their perfumed shadows, she feels none of the warmth they imagined. Outside, the moon has returned, patient and round, waiting above the tiled roofs. Her geta clacks softly against the narrow alley stones as she makes her way home. Tonight, she pauses longer than usual before the small shrine near the ukiyo entrance. She offers a silent prayer, not for wealth, not for fame, but for a single unbroken morning where she might wait and belong only to herself. The hush of night embraces her as she enters her room. She peels off her kimono, each layer falling like a sigh onto the tummy. Her hairpins rest on a lacquer tray, shining like distant stars against the black lacquer. Barefaced, she kneels by the window, allowing the moon to illuminate the contours of her real self, the delicate lines beneath her eyes, the faint crease where her brows tighten in worry, the softness of lips that have known too many forced smiles. She breathes in deeply, feeling the echo of each performance pulsing in her limbs. Slowly, she lifts her fingers to her cheeks as if to reassure herself. I am still here. Beneath every mask, every bow, every carefully curated story, I am still here. In that private hour, she is neither art nor illusion, neither vessel nor product. She is simply a woman, quietly assembling the fragments of herself that have been scattered across 1,000 evenings. Somewhere nearby, another geisha begins tuning her shamisen. its low hum slipping through the paper walls like a whispered lullaby. The city beyond is slowly quieting. Lanterns flicker out one by one, and the river carries away the day's final secrets. She closes her eyes and listens to the fading notes, each sound a gentle thread weaving her back into her own skin. She imagines that tomorrow, when she picks up her mirror again, she might see not only the painted icon that Edo expects, but also this quiet, moon-bathed self, steadfast, tender, unyielding beneath all the silks and songs. In this small moment of solitude, she allows herself a fragile hope that she can carry a fragment of this hidden self into the morning to place it like a secret blossom beneath her obi, a silent companion among the many layers she will wear again. Then she bows her head, resting her forehead against her folded hands, and exhales, an offering to the night, a promise to herself. As dawn gently teases the horizon with pale threads of light, the world of the geisha stirs from its delicate cocoon. Yet for her, the transition from night's soft embrace to the day's obligations is never abrupt. It unfolds like a silent koto string, one subtle note at a time. She lies in the faint warmth of her futon, feeling the pulse of her own heart beneath layers of fragile skin. The smell of last night's incense still lingers, mixing with the sharpness of the cold morning air slipping through the thin shoshi screens. The first task of the day is always internal, gathering the scattered pieces of self she allowed to unravel in the moonlit hours. Slowly, she begins rebuilding her mask, not yet with paint or silk, but with breath, posture, and memory. She recalls the stories she's told, the laughter she's borrowed, the glances she's returned like quiet origami messages folded in plain sight. When she finally sits up, the room greets her in half-light, the lacquered mirror waiting patiently, the combs lined like soldiers before a silent battle, the silk kimono hanging, its folds whispering secrets of old performances and vanished admirers. As she rises, the tatami mats creak softly, a reminder that even in stillness, life moves beneath her feet. She steps toward the wash basin, splashing her face with cold water, a sharp return to the realm of duty and expectation. The reflection that meets her eyes is unguarded for a fleeting second, a rare glimpse of a woman who belongs to neither the ukiyo nor the guests, but only to herself. The process of transformation begins. The thick white oshiroi base, applied carefully to erase any traces of fatigue or doubt, turns her skin into a living canvas. The black lines framing her eyes are drawn with practiced precision, defining an expression that is at once inviting and unreachable. The red lips, sculpted into a petal-like shape, promise stories that will never fully be told. In the courtyard outside, other young apprentices sweep fallen leaves, their sleeves brushing against each other in silent camaraderie. The wooden water buckets clink, and the slow rhythm of morning chores becomes an invisible metronome, guiding every move inside the house. Today, she will perform at a private tea house for a group of traveling poets and an aging merchant known for his melancholic songs about the fleeting cherry blossoms. She recalls his face, lined with years of missed chances and old regrets, and prepares the small arsenal of gestures, words, and melodies she will use to soothe him. For every guest, she becomes a different echo, a bright reflection of their desires, a moonlit ripple across the surface of their loneliness. To the poets, she is the living verse they cannot capture on paper. To the merchant, she is a reminder of his youth wrapped in silk. To the apprentice watching from the hallway, she is both dream and warning. On her way to the tea house, she rides in a simple palanquin, hidden from direct view. Outside, Edo bustles. Merchants hawk dried fish and silk scraps. Children chase each other around dusty corners, and samurai move with a composed menace beneath the afternoon sun. Through the thin panel of the palanquin, she glimpses a young mother carrying a baby on her back, stopping to admire a display of sweet bean cakes. For a moment, she wonders what it would be like to belong entirely to one small world. to be bound not by contract or performance, but by the simple warmth of shared life. The tea house appears like a mirage, its delicate lanterns swaying in rhythm with the whispering pines nearby. She steps out gracefully, helped by a young male attendant who avoids her eyes, perhaps out of respect or perhaps afraid of the powerful mystery her presence embodies. Inside, the air is heavy with incense and possibility. She kneels before the assembled guests, her movements fluid as water, each motion designed to delight and comfort. The poets begin their recitations, their verses floating between laughter and contemplative sighs. She listens, head slightly tilted, inserting small, thoughtful comments, never too much, never too little. When she stands to perform her dance, the room holds its breath. The slow unfolding of her sleeves, the delicate fan movements, the near-invisible tilts of her head, all compose a language more eloquent than words. The musicians follow her pace as if they were tethered to her heartbeats. The merchant's eyes fill with tears as he watches. Perhaps he is seeing his lost love, or the spring blossoms that no longer bloom for him. Or perhaps he simply realizes that beauty, however vivid, always drifts beyond our grasp. After the dance, she sits beside him, pours him sake with both hands, and listens to his whispered confessions. She offers only gentle nods and small, comforting hums, a surrogate moon to his private tide. When the gathering ends, the guests shuffle out into the indigo evening, bowing deeply, their faces alight with the bittersweet glow of nostalgia. She remains behind, folding her fan carefully, her gaze lowered but her mind far away, tracing lines of poems never finished, melodies never sung aloud. Back in her room, the evening repeats its quiet ritual. She removes her paint, unfastens her obi, and lets her hair fall in a silent cascade down her back. The faint echo of shamisen strings drifts in from a distant room, like a ghostly thread tying her to the world beyond paper walls. She looks at her hands, small, strong, calloused from endless hours of practice, and wonders if anyone will ever touch them without, expecting the performance to follow. In that thought lies both her freedom and her prison. She slides open a small box and takes out a single hairpin, gifted to her years ago by a young poet who once claimed her presence had saved him from despair. She had laughed softly at the time, dismissing it as romantic nonsense, but later found herself clutching the hairpin in moments of deep solitude. She places it beside her futon, as though it were a guardian spirit. Then she extinguishes the lamp, her room swallowed by a velvet darkness that feels strangely protective. Outside, Edo is falling into its midnight hush. The moon, round and solemn, casts pale light over tiled roofs and drifting smoke from street vendors. Somewhere, a temple bell tolls, long and low, merging with the wind in a gentle lament. She closes her eyes and lets herself drift into the sound, each breath carrying her further from the layers of silk, the orchestrated laughs, the expectations wrapped around her like ivy. Tomorrow, the cycle begins anew. Another face, another dance, another series of glances exchanged like porcelain tokens. But for now, in this final moment before sleep, she feels as light as a crane feather, carried beyond the walls of Edo to a dreamscape where she is neither geisha nor ghost, but simply herself, unpainted, unperformed, unbound. And so, after the final dance of the night, after the final laughter, and the echo of a single shamisen string, the geisha's world retreats once again into its soft cocoon of silk and incense. The last guests bow and disappear into the foggy alleys, their lanterns bobbing like small orange moons. Inside, the geisha slowly undoes the elaborate layers that have held her together all evening. The heavy obi that is pressed into her spine, the layered underrobes that have soaked up every beat of tension and every quickened heartbeat. In the mirror, she faces herself. The white foundation, now slightly cracked around her eyes and lips, the black lines that defined her brows and eyes, the red that painted her small, restrained mouth. All these are symbols of an identity crafted with care, but also masks she must remove alone. As she wipes them away, she uncovers the woman underneath, the private self who knows the softness of an empty room and the vulnerability of solitude. In the quiet of her chamber, she becomes both performer and observer. She recalls each subtle glance exchanged during the night, each hidden joke, each moment of silent connection. She knows that beyond the painted smile, there is an ocean of emotion waiting to surface. Longings, memories of a family left behind as a child apprentice. The ache for tenderness that is never quite allowed to bloom. A geisha does not belong to anyone fully, not even to herself. She is an echo of an ideal, grace without question, art without flaw, presence without burden. Her value is measured not by what she wants, but by how completely she disappears into the role expected of her. In this surrender, there is power, but also a subtle kind of erasure, a life that is lived in service of moments rather than milestones. When dawn approaches, the city of Edo hums to life once again. The merchants begin to open their shops, fishmongers call out in the cold morning air, and the first samurai shuffle home, lanterns dimmed. In this transition between night and day, the geisha finally rests. Her head touches the small wooden pillow designed to protect her intricate hair arrangements, a reminder that even in sleep, she must maintain an illusion. Yet, it is perhaps in these stolen hours before sunrise that she feels most human. The room smells faintly of camellia oil and old tatami mats. She listens to the distant drip of rain from a paper lantern and the hush of the breeze slipping through the wooden slats. In this fragile moment, she can imagine another life, perhaps one with simpler joys, fewer rules, a life where she might laugh freely without calculating the impact on her reputation or practice. A dance simply for the pleasure of movement rather than perfection. But as the sky begins to glow in pale gray, she closes her eyes and releases these visions into the space between breaths. By the time she rises again, she will don her persona like a second skin, ready to slip back into the river of performance, ready to shape-shift into what is needed, expected, and admired. To live as a geisha in Edo, Japan, was to be both seen and unseen, adored and yet unreachable. It was to live in a world of constant rehearsals, a life measured in gestures so delicate they can disappear like fog at sunrise. It was to navigate a delicate labyrinth of power, tradition, and fleeting intimacy, and to do so with elegance so seamless that most would never suspect the sacrifices concealed beneath the shimmering sleeves. When you next see an image of a geisha, her head slightly bowed, her fingers gently adjusting a hairpin, remember that behind that moment lies an entire universe of discipline, poetry, and silent negotiations. Her story is not simply one of beauty or entertainment, but a profound exploration of identity shaped by a society, steepest dreams and demands. As you drift away tonight, imagine her final bow under the moonlit corridor, her sandals softly tapping on wet stones, the hush of 1,000 petals falling in the dark. Let her story remind you that even the most beautiful performances are stitched together from hidden threads of solitude, resilience, and longing. And that, perhaps, is what makes them, and us, so achingly human. And so, as the midnight lamps flicker low and the tatami floors begin to cool, the geisha removes her layers one by one, each piece a memory, each fold a secret. The obi once tightly racked to maintain perfect posture and silhouette loosens, revealing the fatigue beneath the practiced elegance. Beneath it all is a woman, not an untouchable vision, but a human spirit weighed by duty and desire. At this hour, the echo of the shamisen strings still lingers in her mind. She replays every guest's laughter, each subtle glance, the faintest twitch of a hand on a sake cup, small gestures she has trained her life to read like poetry. In those small movements, she deciphers the hidden sadness of a merchant far from home, the shallow pride of a samurai trying to impress, or the lonely longing of a scholar searching for fleeting warmth. In each encounter, she becomes a mirror, reflecting back whatever they need to see. But when the door slides shut, and her face meets her own reflection in the small hand mirror, she wonders who truly remains. Imagine standing before that mirror. You are stripped of paint and ornaments, facing a face you rarely meet honestly. Underneath the white foundation lies skin marked by time and emotion. Under the heavy wig is a scalp that aches from hours of wait. The kanzashi hairpins, beautiful but sharp, once symbols of status, now set aside like silent sentinels. These nightly rituals are not just about physical cleansing, but a quiet exorcism of the day's performed personas. Sleep does not come easily. The mind races with the next day's lessons, the debts owed to the ukiyo, the silent rivalries within the house. The worry about an aging face, a faltering voice, or a slip during a dance. Each potential mistake threatens not only personal pride, but the reputation of generations before and after. In Edo society, to falter publicly could ripple through the clan, the neighborhood, and the carefully curated image of the entire Hanamachi. Yet, in these moments of vulnerability, a quiet resolve grows. It is easy to forget that behind each bow, each poetic phrase, lies an unyielding core. A geisha is not simply a performer of softness. She is a strategist of survival. Her craft is her shield, her wit her sword. The same woman who kneels gracefully to pour tea is the one who negotiates debts with cunning precision, who deciphers which patron might become a lifelong supporter and which might vanish after one fleeting season. As dawn approaches, she listens for the first birds beyond the paper screens. The city stirs. Servants shuffle, distant bells chime. Fishermen call out along the Sumida River. The geisha's world is suspended between the fading moon and the rising sun, between dreams and duty. In this liminal space, she briefly allows herself to breathe as just a woman, not a living poem, not a floating flower, but simply a soul who once dreamed of kites and festivals before her hair was tied and her name changed. Soon she will rise again. The wig will be reset, the kimono layers arranged, the white mask reapplied. She will become the legend her clients seek and her ukiyo demands. Her steps through narrow lantern-lit alleys will seem effortless, her laughter like drifting cherry petals. But you, now knowing what hides beneath each soft note and gentle bow, may see her differently. She is an echo of an entire era's contradictions. Refined yet raw, controlled yet endlessly creative, fragile yet fiercely unbreakable. To live as a geisha in Edo, Japan, is to dance daily on the thinnest edge between art and survival. Each evening is both an ending and a beginning, each performance a silent gamble with reputation and selfhood. And so, as the first sunbeams slip across the tatami, she stands. A final glance at the mirror, a silent vow to endure, to enchant, to embody the fleeting beauty of this world. Then, she slides the door open, stepping into another day that will demand everything and offer only whispers of true freedom. But for her, those whispers are enough to keep moving, to keep dancing, to keep becoming the living embodiment of 1,000 untold stories. As the night deepens and the streets of Edo become quiet under the glow of faint lanterns, the geisha retreat into their inner worlds, worlds carefully guarded behind layers of silk and subtlety. After entertaining guests with laughter that echoes like fragile chimes, and conversations that dance delicately around politics, poetry, and philosophy, there is a final ritual, the quiet removal of layers. Peeling off the ornate kimono is not simply about comfort. It is a symbolic act of returning to the self, a reminder that beneath the layers of makeup, lacquered hair, and expectations, there still beats a private, solitary heart. The white oshiroi makeup is carefully wiped away, revealing the skin beneath, no longer the porcelain mask that society adores, but the true, unadorned face of a woman who carries both joy and sorrow. The heavy wigs and elaborate kanzashi are set aside, each placed on its stand with precision and reverence. These objects are more than accessories. They are silent witnesses to every performance, every whispered confession, every restrained sigh. Their absence leaves the geisha feeling both vulnerable and free, like a bird stepping out of its gilded cage into the quiet of dawn. As she sits alone before her mirror, the geisha might trace the fine lines at the corner of her eyes, or study the slight tremor in her hands. Reminders of time passing of the countless evenings spent weaving illusion and intimacy. These small moments of self-contemplation are often the only times she belongs entirely to herself. Then there are the private journals, hidden beneath folded silks and secret compartments. Here, geisha record their thoughts in delicate brushstrokes, describing a guest's unexpected kindness, a rival's cutting remark, or a fleeting moment of beauty. A full moon reflected in a cup of sake, a single cherry blossom drifting across the veranda. These journals are safe havens, preserving fragments of the soul that cannot be shared even with closest sisters. In these quiet hours, a geisha might also tend to her calligraphy practice, or play a soft melody on her shamisen, not for an audience, but for herself alone. The strings vibrate gently in the stillness, each note a small personal confession that floats into the night air and vanishes like incense smoke. Beyond the tatami walls, the world outside is rigid and hierarchical, driven by the codes of Bushido, by family lineage, by expectations so heavy they can shape a life before it even begins. But within the geisha house, there exists a parallel realm where women rule their own destinies, at least within the boundaries they carve for themselves. Yet even within this small kingdom, there are reminders of fragility. A patron's favor can disappear overnight. A scandal whispered behind a folding fan can end a career. A single misstep in a dance or a slip of the tongue in a tea ceremony can tarnish an entire reputation. The geisha live in a constant state of poised vigilance, each movement and word carefully chosen, like a warrior in a delicate duel. Despite this, there are fleeting connections that shimmer beneath the surface. Moments of shared laughter with another geisha, an old patron's poem left on a folded piece of rice paper, a glimpse of compassion in an apprentice's eyes. These are the hidden threads that bind them together, stronger than silk and more enduring than the applause of a fleeting audience. When morning approaches, a pale light begins to creep into the wooden halls, and the first birds stir among the pine branches. The geisha, having reclaimed her own skin and spirit, folds away her private self once again. The familiar ritual of preparation begins, the brushing of hair, the layering of kimono, the mixing of oshiroi. With each layer, she rebuilds her public persona, the one that will step into another day of performances, negotiations, and subtle power plays. A transformation is complete. To the outside world, she is once again the serene, unreachable flower, gliding through Edo's pleasure quarters like a living poem. But beneath each gentle step lies the hidden memory of those silent nights, the moments when she existed not as a muse or a performer, but simply as herself. And perhaps, in that private world that no one else can enter, there lies the true art of the geisha, the ability to carry 1,000 masks while protecting the quiet, flickering flame of her own humanity. You might imagine the geisha house as a glittering stage, always bright and alive with music and laughter. But behind those layers of silk and the carefully painted smiles lay quiet moments filled with introspection and a certain, unnameable longing. After the guests left, after the clapping and the songs, the house often fell into a hushed stillness, the kind of silence that seems to press on your chest like a heavy winter blanket. In these quiet hours, geisha would remove their elaborate hairpieces, slowly wipe away the layers of white oshiroi makeup, revealing a face beneath that almost felt like a stranger. They might sit on a tatami mat, brush in hand, combing out the stiff curls, their fingers moving methodically as if trying to untangle more than just hair. Some would talk softly to each other, their voices as fragile as a moth's wing. Others preferred solitude, sitting by a paper lantern, writing letters they would never send or tracing kanji characters over and over in a quiet dance of ink and thought. There was an odd comfort in the repetition, the ritualistic movements of preparing and unpreparing the self each night. It became a kind of private ceremony, a conversation between the public persona and the hidden soul. The painted mask that dazzled crowds by day was carefully folded away at night, only to be reconstructed again come dawn. Despite the cultural romanticization, loneliness stalked these women like a silent shadow. Many geisha found themselves caught between worlds, never truly belonging to the guests who adored them for a few hours, nor to the everyday society that viewed them with both fascination and suspicion. A geisha's life was an intricate pattern of constraints and performances. Even in sleep, she lay like a sculpture, head resting on a wooden takamakura pillow designed to protect her elaborate hairstyle. An invention that turned sleep into yet another discipline, another practice of controlled stillness. In this strange in-between world, her value was measured not only by her skills, but by her ability to hold stories, to remember secrets whispered over sake cups, to embody an impossible ideal of fleeting beauty and timeless poise. But these women were more than the sum of their silken sleeves and practiced smiles. Beneath every hairpin and lacquered fan beat a heart that learned to hold both pain and joy in the same breath. They navigated a delicate web of expectations, to entertain without falling in love, to appear endlessly youthful, while time carved quiet lines at the corners of their eyes, to bring light to a room, even when their own spirits flickered like a dying candle. They were artists, yes, musicians, poets, dancers. But they were also archivists of human vulnerability, chroniclers of ephemeral dreams shared in the soft glow of lantern light. The songs they played on their shamisen weren't just melodies. They were silent confessions, fragments of a life lived at the edge of longing and performance. As dawn approached, the city of Edo would begin to stir. Lanterns extinguished one by one, the air cool and laced with the faint scent of river mist and cooking rice. The geisha, still in her quiet vigil, would hear the distant rumble of merchant carts, the soft thud of wooden geta sandals on the early morning roads. It was in these twilight hours that she was most herself, stripped of ornament, surrounded by only the echoes of her own breath and the faint memory of music fading into the night. She was no longer the performer or the idealized fantasy. She was a woman, quietly brave, quietly alive, her inner world as intricate and shifting as the patterns on her kimono. In the hush before sunrise, she would gently slide shut the shoshi screen, her silhouette framed against the pale indigo sky, and prepare once again to step into another day of illusions, rituals, and quiet courage. Imagine the final evenings of an aging geisha who has performed for decades, her hair once black as ink, now streaked with threads of silver, her fingers a little slower when they draw the shamisen strings, her voice more hushed when she sings the old songs of longing and moonlight. The young apprentices watch her with a mixture of reverence and quiet terror, seeing both their future and their inevitable fading. In these twilight years, a geisha often becomes a mother figure within the ukiyo. She may take on apprentices of her own, teaching them not only the skills of performance, but the delicate arts of reading a room. Knowing when to laugh, when to let a pause hang heavy, when to intervene with a gentle shift of conversation to save a client's pride. Yet beneath this matriarchal role lies a profound solitude. The former patrons have long since turned to younger faces, or retired, or passed away. The letters stop arriving. The gifts cease. The public, who once hung on every turn of her wrist, and every flicker of her gaze, moves on to the next shimmering talent. She watches from behind the thin paper screens as new generations step into the light, each thinking they will remain forever luminous. Her final days are often marked by an uneasy mix of pride and sorrow. Pride for the legacy she helped shape the songs that live on, the dances still performed, the young women who carry her techniques forward like fragile flame. Sorrow for the lives she might have lived beyond the tea houses, the quiet family dinners she never attended, the personal love she perhaps never truly experienced without strings or schedules. Sometimes, a geisha chooses to formally retire in a ceremony called hiki-iwai. Friends and patrons gather to celebrate her career, offering poems, paintings, and parting gifts. Yet even this moment of closure is bittersweet. It is both an honoring and a farewell, a reminder that in a world obsessed with youth and perfection, no mask stays on forever. Those who do not retire may instead simply fade away into the background, supporting the house, sharing stories at small gatherings, or occasionally stepping on stage for special events where nostalgia coats every note and every painted eyebrow. Their presence becomes a living memory, an echo rather than a voice. And after they are gone, perhaps only a koan remains, or a carefully folded kimono hidden in a wooden chest, or a fan with a single crack running through the lacquer. Small ghosts of a life that once shimmered in lantern light. This conclusion is not meant to be merely somber. Rather, it is an invitation to see each geisha's journey as a poem that unfolds line by line, unpredictable and luminous. The beauty of it lies precisely in its impermanence. The meticulous training, the elegant illusions, the carefully curated persona, all of it is a living art, but also a kind of quiet self-sacrifice. In a way, each geisha embodies an almost universal human struggle, the tension between who we are and who we must appear to be, the silent negotiations we make with society's expectations, the small, secret rebellions we tuck behind closed shoshi doors. As we step back from the tea house, slip off our imaginary zori sandals, and return to our modern world of constant notifications and bright, restless screens, we might feel a sudden hush within us. A new kind of listening. Perhaps tonight, before falling asleep, we will remember the rhythm of the fan opening, the low, steady pulse of the shamisen, the quiet power of a single gesture in a darkened room. We might carry a piece of that ancient moonlight with us, a whisper of another life lived in endless twilight. And in this gentle, reflective closing breath, we might realize, while we may never step into the white-painted face and silk layers of a geisha in Edo, Japan, we all wear masks, dance our own quiet performances, and search for those rare moments when we are truly seen beyond the costume. Thank you for traveling so far with me, across time, across oceans, across the delicate strands of memory and myth. Rest easy and let the echoes of the shamisen guide you softly into sleep.